Hello, this isn't rambling. Today I'm going to be knitting while rambling. This is not an instructional video on knitting, just me rambling mostly. Today I wanted to actually talk about copper IUDs and my experience with them. I actually got the copper IUD twice. Once was several years ago, and the second time was recently, and it's what I currently still have. So if you don't know what an IUD is, it's basically a form of contraceptive, something that could prevent pregnancy, that is inserted into your uterus. An IUD can come in a hormonal form or a non-hormonal form. I chose to get the non-hormonal because I did try taking birth control pills once before, but I didn't like the side effects, so I chose to go with the non-hormonal, which is the copper IUD or Paragard. I don't know if there's an alternative to Paragard, but that's the one I got. And something the doctor did tell me though, if you want to go the hormonal route, is that the concentration of the hormonal IUD is far, far, far less than the concentrations you would find in a birth control pill. So if you do experience some symptoms with birth control pills, but you still want to go the hormonal route, it could still work for you because the concentration is so low. So maybe you wouldn't experience anything. And also another benefit of the hormonal IUD is that you can have less painful periods if you're somebody who gets a lot of cramping, and it could also shorten your periods. And for some people, I think your period could straight up disappear. And that all sounds very nice. And it did make me consider it, but I was just wary of the side effects of the hormones, so I still stuck with the copper IUD. So the first time I was interested in getting an IUD several years ago, I actually had no idea where I was supposed to get started. So I contacted my primary care doctor on the phone and I asked if I was eligible to get one. And they actually forwarded me to like a doctor within their thing. I don't know, a doctor within their group or whatever that they knew, like a OB-GYN. And the phone call that was like less than 5 minutes with my primary care doctor, they charged me like $80 or something, which was stupid to me because I only talked to you for like less than 5 minutes. I feel like it was like less than 3 minutes actually. But anyways, so I went to the OB-GYN they recommended to me. And so I had a consultation with her, and she kind of like talked about the process and the option between hormonal and non-hormonal. And then there was a whole rigmarole to get the IUD. Basically, they had to get in contact with the insurance, with my insurance, to see if the insurance will cover the cost. And so I was waiting for the phone call back, and I think eventually like a week later or something, they called me back and then they told me that my insurance did not cover the copper IUD. And then they told me that if I wanted to get it, then it would cost me like, I think it was like 1.3K. And so then I was like, ugh, it's like, why? Like, once again, it's like the insurance not covering anything. And so I was like, oh, okay, then maybe I don't want to get it for now. And so then I was like trying to figure out, is there an alternative? And then so I actually found sort of like one of those family planning places, and they help like cover the cost of certain tests and procedures and stuff like that. And so I actually made an appointment with one of those places, and I had to go through the consultation process again. And I really love this doctor that I spoke with because she was so kind and informative, and she was like explaining everything so well. But after she kind of informed me on everything, I told her that I would like to get the copper IUD. And so I can't remember if I got it that day or if I had to come back to get it. But for some reason, okay, this is what confuses me, because you still give your insurance information to the family planning center. But for some reason, when I come here, my insurance covers the cost of the IUD and I just have to pay for the procedure. But then at the place my primary care doctor recommended, the insurance does not cover it. Like, what? That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I don't understand it. But maybe it's because of the whole thing I mentioned earlier about maybe because it's from family planning, that like a family planning center, that they help cover costs or something. I don't really understand it. But anyways, so when I was having it inserted, what happened is you basically lay on that bed thing, and then there's these like little stirrups where you put your feet up on. So you're like laying down, your butt has to be at the very edge of the bed, like hanging kind of, and then your feet are up in like little stirrups, so your legs are like up. And then the doctor, she would say all the steps that she was gonna take before she did it. And so I think in the beginning she put like a lubricant on her finger, and then I don't remember, did she put her finger inside me? I forgot what she did. Oh, I think she was applying the lubricant on the vaginal opening. But after she used the lubricant, I think she had gotten the speculum. I think that's what it's called, but it's like, I don't know what it looks like because I was laying on my back, but it's like a metal device because it felt like metal when it touched me. But it's like a metal device that I think it like spreads your like vaginal walls and stuff so that they can see what they're doing. But she put that, and then that didn't hurt at all for me. And then afterwards, I can't remember. I think she like measured the depth or something, or she was preparing the, you know, the thingy. There's basically another tool that they use to like, it holds the IUD at the tip, I think, and then they use that to like insert it into your cervix. But I remember she told me that I'm gonna feel a brief pain when she inserts the IUD. And okay, so this was the part I was scared of, because I had heard stories of people like fainting and people saying it's like the most horrible pain ever when you get it inserted. But for me, it felt like a very, 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 very strong period cramp. So it hurt, but it was like a bearable amount of pain. And then the doctor, she did it so fast that the pain was so brief. Like, I feel like the whole procedure was like super, super fast. And then after that, she did I think she did an ultrasound to see that it was placed correctly. And then I was like good to go, I think. This was like several years ago, so I'm trying to remember everything. But I remember I had taken this appointment like literally after my work, and I didn't take an Advil or anything. It was like right after work, I had driven straight to the clinic. And so after I got the IUD inserted, I did feel cramps, and I was like not feeling that good on my drive home. But I think like a few hours later, the cramps disappeared. And then the very next day, I didn't feel any pain at all, which was like crazy to me because I thought I was gonna be in pain for a while. But then the very next day, I felt like completely normal. And so I didn't experience any cramping or anything like that for a while until it was time for my period. Now, normally I'm somebody who rarely ever gets cramps on my period. Majority of the time, I don't get any cramps at all. But it is like a warning that they gave that if you do a copper IUD, you will bleed more and you'll cramp more. And I felt like I was okay with that because of the fact that I don't get cramps, rarely get cramps in general. But since I had the copper IUD inserted, I did notice that during my periods I was getting cramping, and it was kind of painful. But again, it was not like a intolerable amount of pain. It was like bearable, but it was enough to make me kind of keel over like a shrimp and be like, oh, like a few days. And copper IUDs are more likely to extend your period as well. And I did notice that my periods normally, when I'm not on any sort of birth control or anything, I usually have like 7 to 8 days. Like my period usually lasts 7 to 8 days. But with the copper IUD, my period lasts around 10 days. And it actually changes the flow pattern as well. So when I'm on my normal period, I would usually have the heaviest bleeding on like the first, maybe like the second and third day I would have the most bleeding. Like the first 3 days I would have the most bleeding. But for the copper IUD, for some reason, my heaviest bleeding is like on the 4th and 5th day. And I would have cramps, which I normally would not have. And the cramping would start like a little bit before my period, and it would last during the period. But once the period was over, I was honestly fine and didn't have any cramping at all. But unfortunately, my copper IUD, after I think less than 2 months, it partially expelled. And the doctor did mention that this is something that could happen. She said that if you are someone who did not give birth before, for some reason your body can have a higher chance of expelling or rejecting the IUD. So basically, one day when I was checking it in the shower, I would like check the IUD strings every once in a while to make sure nothing is out of sorts. And I noticed that I could feel I could feel part of the body of the IUD. Like it didn't feel like just the strings. I could feel like literally one of the arms and then like a part of like the body sticking out. So you know how it's like a little T shape? So one of the T's, the little T arms were like sticking out, and so was like the bottom half of the IUD. And so I was very alarmed, and I was like paranoid and thinking, oh, what if it like rips something because it's like half sticking out, and then I get like, I don't know, some craziness, an infection or something from it ripping something because it like is coming out weird. And so I went back to the clinic and I had to get it removed. And they asked me if I wanted to have a new one reinserted, but by then I was having like mixed feelings about the IUD because it kind of freaked me out that it had just come out on its own. And so then I chose not to. But several years passed and I decided that I wanted to try again, and I wanted to go with the copper one again. And I went to the same clinic, but unfortunately the doctor that I liked was no longer there. So I had a different doctor, and I told her what had happened about how I got a copper IUD years ago, but then it came out, but I wanted to try again. And then so this time around the doctor didn't really have to explain much to me because I kind of went through it before. However, she did mention that one of the factors that can cause possibly the IUD to be expelled is if you have a lot of clotting when you have your period, basically when your blood comes out in clumps, which is also more likely when you have the copper IUD because you have heavier bleeding. But she was saying that sometimes if your blood is like very clumpy, it could like potentially push things out of place. So after a brief talk with her, she started the whole process of inserting the IUD. I laid on the bed. She did the lubricant. She did the speculum. And then it was time for the insertion. But unfortunately, for this doctor, it took her 3 tries to get the IUD inside. And every time she made an attempt, it was making me kind of sweat because she was taking longer. It was like, the process was like much longer than the first time I got the IUD. Like, so like each time I was like tensing, and then she was like, and then I felt like the horrible cramping pain. And then she was like, oh, I couldn't get it in. Let me try again. And then she did it again. Oh, I couldn't get it in. It's very tight over there. And then she couldn't get it into the cervix or like through the cervix. And then finally on the 3rd time she got it in. And then I was like feeling like not very good. And so I feel like the 2nd time was more painful than the 1st time. But I feel like if she had gotten it on her 1st try, then the pain would be like equivalent to the 1st one, where it wouldn't be that much. But because she did like 3 times, it was making feel a little not good. And after that, she was like, oh, you're having some bleeding, so I'm gonna give you a pad. And then for some reason, she didn't do the ultrasound to check if it's in place. Cause remember, like, I went to the same clinic the 1st time and they did the ultrasound. But then this time she didn't do an ultrasound, but this was a different doctor, so I don't know. And so I put a pad on and then I drove home. And this time around, I was getting cramps like every single day until it was my period, and I was bleeding. I was having light bleeding every single day until it was my period. But I think it was because I had gone to the appointment kind of when it was approaching my period date. And so maybe my body was like, oh, your period's coming soon? Huh? Let's give you a little preview of what's to come. And so I was getting slight bleeding for like 1.5 weeks with the addition of cramps every day. And then like after 1.5 weeks, I got heavy bleeding. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, I guess this is my actual period starting now. And so then my period started, and it did last around 10 days once again. Kind of like how when I got the IUD the 1st time, how it changed my period to 10 days. So I was like, okay, so this is my actual period. The bleeding before must have been because my body's like adapting, and then it's like confused. And after my period was over, I didn't have any more bleeding, didn't have any more cramping. But I would definitely say if you are somebody who experiences cramps, maybe do not get the copper IUD, because I think it will make your cramps very painful. Because me, as someone who didn't get any cramps at all during my periods, or just very rarely, and then to have cramps for like almost 3 weeks was kind of crazy. Although like my body like turned normal again after the period, my body was like feeling fine, not feeling cramping and not having any weird bleeding anymore. And so maybe if you're someone who gets very painful cramps, to avoid the copper IUD. And because of the fact that my first IUD had expelled itself, I was kind of paranoid of that happening again, because I also heard from the doctor that, from the first doctor, not the second doctor who took 3 tries, but the first doctor, I remember her saying that if your body rejects an IUD, it's more likely to reject it again. So I would be more diligent with checking the strings. I would be checking it almost every day or every other day. And there were a couple times where when I felt the strings, it felt like I felt more than just the strings. It felt like I felt the bottom bump of the IUD, and I was like, oh no, 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 my body is expelling it again. And so it was weird though, because some days it would feel like I just felt the strings, and then other days it felt like I felt part of the body of the IUD. But I went to a follow-up appointment of the IUD insertion, because they usually have you do a follow-up like a month after. And I had the ultrasound done, and apparently it's still in its proper place. So I'm happy, but also surprised and confused, because I don't know what I was feeling then. I wonder if maybe the strings, because I think there's like 2 strings floating around in there, but maybe sometimes the strings are like stuck together. So maybe that part, maybe it was like kind of like stuck together at the base, and then so it felt like it was the bottom of the IUD. But apparently, according to the ultrasound, it's in place. It didn't get expelled or partially expelled, so I'm very happy. Although I'll continue to check the strings every day just to be sure. And something that you should also be cautious of is if you use a period disc or cup, although the chances are low, you should still be aware that you don't accidentally pull your IUD strings with your cup or disc, because I kind of wonder if maybe that's what I did without realizing it the first time. Or it could have just been my body rejecting it. But now I think I'm going to be more cautious with my period disc. So maybe before I insert my disc, I'm going to try to like flick those strings out into the back where they're out of reach, and then put my disc in. Maybe that'll help. Although I don't know if it was the disc that made the first one come out to begin with. It could have just been my body rejecting it, and then this time my body is okay with it or something. But I'm really happy that things seem to be in order this time. And if it happens to pop out again, maybe I'll give a little update video on that. I do definitely think that having an IUD gives me a peace of mind, because, you know, condoms can always break, and for birth control pills, if you miss a day or something, you could still get pregnant, and I do not want any unexpected pregnancies. So an IUD definitely makes me feel safer. And if you're somebody who maybe doesn't want kids right now, but would want kids in the future, you could always get an IUD and then just have it removed when you want kids or something like that. But that's my story on my experience on copper IUDs. I hope that it was informative. Personally, when I was first interested in IUDs, I was digging, looking for stories of other people's experiences. So if you're like me, then maybe this was somewhat giving some insight onto how copper IUDs are. Although I know that everyone's bodies could react differently. Alright then, so if you listened this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!